how can you realize, okay, if I take this risk, if I do this, the benefits outweigh the bad things that could happen. And when you implement that strategy into your life and you take calculated risk, you're going to end up in a pretty good spot 99% of the time. All right, so I'm here with Danielle Crawford. Her Instagram handle is homegirlinvest. Like, what an awesome name to have on Instagram, homegirl. Like, so catchy. I love it. I'm excited to have you because I believe I'll have to ask some of my other guests and make sure somebody may come back and be like, no, that's not true. But I'm pretty sure you're the first person from Canada that has been on this podcast so far. So this is a first for us here.
That's an honor. I'm feeling very lucky to hold that title on the Finance Cowboy podcast. Wow.
Yes. Yeah, I am stoked. So we were talking before. This is going to be a great episode. Danielle has done a lot of really cool things in a short amount of time. Started investing just a couple years ago and has figured out the game. That's the key is getting started and then figure out the game as you go along. So I'm excited to dive into it. But before we do, just so the listeners kind of have a understanding of who you are, give us a quick backstory, not related to real estate, of who Danielle Crawford is.
Okay, so obviously my name is Danielle. I'm from Ottawa, Canada. I grew up here. My family's from here. And like many people, I followed sort of that typical path, like I finished school, went to university to get a good job after. Going to school, I thought I was going to be like a lawyer after. That wasn't happening. Didn't love school, was never going to go back to law school, couldn't pay me to go back there. So when I finished, actually, I paid for school myself. So I paid for it in cash. I worked full-time jobs while I was learning. And then when I finished and all my friends had to go get a job because they were in debt, I wasn't in that position. So I actually went backpacking, on and off. I'd be gone for 6 months of the year, come back and work for another
What?
6. Yeah.
Where'd you go? Give us the
So
rundown.
So I've been to a couple places in Europe. I spent almost 6 months in Asia. So my best friend was teaching in South Korea. When she finished her contract, I went to go meet her. So we did South Korea, China, Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia. That was, and that was the first big long trip I'd ever taken. And then after that, I was hooked. So I went to Australia, New Zealand, and Indonesia by myself. And then I went to South America for 5 months by myself. So, and I was always boomeranging. I would leave for a couple of months. I'd come home and work one or two jobs and then leave again. So, I was really I wanted to be free. It was the first taste of seeing people live a life outside of a normal 9 to 5. The city I live in is very government, so it's very structured. So just to see people sort of living unconventionally, lots of nomads out there, and I loved it. That for me was just the most incredible thing, meeting people and experiencing new places. And then when I came home from my last trip, I met my now fiance. So I didn't really want to be packing up and moving again, or getting ready to leave. So I was like, you know what? Okay, I'm gonna dig my heels in. I'm gonna get a real job, give up waitressing or whatever I was doing at the time. And now I myself work for the government.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. That's funny. That is funny how that works out. I can't believe, do you just when you backpack, we got to dig into this just for a second. Are you sleeping out in a tent? Are you staying in
No.
hotels?
So sometimes you'd be if you decide you're gonna go camping or something, you might go sleep out in a tent. Mostly I was staying in hostels. So, you're showing up to a place, you're checking in, and then you've got 14 people living in the same bedroom, just everyone doing the same thing, exploring, having a good time, living, running away from something sometimes.
That is unbelievable. I bet you probably just itch sometimes I got to get back. You're grounded
Oh,
now, but I'm sure there's a part of you who says, get me back out in the wild.
always. And you know what? It was funny because within 2 weeks of my last trip, I was sitting in a cubicle in an office. And someone's like, "Are you so excited about your new job?" And I looked at them and I was like, "I almost can't understand how I got here." So I don't know if that's how I describe it. And
That
so,
is
as much as I'm grateful for the life I have now and I do love it, that was actually the thing that was the catalyst for real estate when I started looking at just how do I like put money to work because I'm not traveling as much anymore. I'm still a really good saver. What do I do with this now? And then when I was looking at all the investment options, for me, I saw real estate. I saw people that were leaving their jobs to do it full time. And I was like, oh my gosh, I could do this and eventually like go back to, traveling the world or having 6 months with on your own schedule. And that for me was like the aha moment.
Yeah, I mean,
I was obsessed.
all of us wanna taste, like, that freedom, but the
Yeah.
fact that you did, and then you're like, whatever the word is, like, tamed now, and now I can only imagine, like, after you've already had it, you're like, "Okay,
Yeah.
let me just be normal for a little bit, but while I'm doing that, we're gonna figure out the fastest way possible to get back to that,"
Yeah.
or to
And
be
like
able to have the opportunity, whether it's that or something else, but just have that freedom.
for sure. And like it was great in the sense because it tests you out in the real world, like it's all about the people you meet and the relationships that you have. You have to get really good at being uncomfortable because you're throwing yourself into situations every day that you're not familiar with. You learn to trust yourself a little bit more. Like you learn to really be brave and take risks. And the more I think you trust yourself in that environment, the more comfortable you feel taking risks in your life, even at home. So, like I live a pretty normal life now, but I'm probably the least normal of all my friends.
That's cool though. It keeps life interesting, It keeps
Mhm.
it interesting. That's really cool. I like how you made that connection. It's like, hey, bro, I'm just showing up in some random Asian country and
Yeah.
living with strangers. If I can do that, I can literally do anything. I think, most people aren't gonna be able to pull from that experience, but there's experiences in my life that happened previously that I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, I conquered that. Like I did that. Whatever is ahead of me is cake. And I think that's important, like from a mindset standpoint. A lot of times we keep this podcast to practicalities or just in general my content and things I think about. I'm like, oh, practical stuff. But a
Yeah.
lot of it's mindset, like mindset. How can you realize, okay, if I take this risk, if I do this, the benefits outweigh the bad things that could happen. And when you implement that strategy into your life and you take calculated risk, you're going to end up in a pretty good spot 99% of the time.
Yeah, and I think that as humans, we really talk ourselves out of things a lot. There's things that we want, but we won't pursue them. And there's always a reason not to do something. So it's like, what if we started flipping that script? Like, how can I do this? What is actually stopping me? And like 98% of that is going to be mental for the
Mm,
most part. So, and it doesn't have to be going and having these massive adventures and throwing yourself into huge uncomfortable positions. It can be as easy as like talking to strangers on the on the bus, like going out to an event where you know no one because you want to learn, like a real estate networking event. You know no one, but you want to learn. That's like a very easy thing to do, but most of us will tell ourselves we don't have the time, we shouldn't be there. We have no business being there if we don't have any properties. So it's really just finding like it's mental. It's really just working that mental muscle a little bit.
I love it. It's so important. I mean, that is so important because, like you said, we most of the time we're just holding ourselves back.
Hmm.
There's not anything else holding us back but our mindset and or maybe our fear or lack of confidence. And everybody, I say this all the time, everybody who's an expert, everybody who has property now, everybody who's great at what they do, no matter what field they had no idea at one point. They were
Yeah.
they were lost. They didn't have anything, and they put themselves out there, and now they're able to accumulate what they have now, because of those decisions they made. So why real estate? So I know, on the surface of it, you said, hey, I saw people invest in real estate. They were, reaching freedom. Which I think we all see that. But what was the process like for you outside of that? Because normally once you like see that, you're like, oh, I want to do it. Everybody says that, but most
Mhm.
people don't ever do it. So how did you actually go from, oh, this would work to I'm actually doing it?
Yeah, so I will preface this by saying, like, I'm somebody who gets very obsessed with things, and if I'm doing it, I think it's the best idea. So if I've started drinking the Kool-Aid, like I'm making the Kool-Aid very
I
quickly
love it.
after
I
that.
love it.
Yeah, and I'm definitely somebody who like if I say I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. I will find a way. That's just sort of personality trait. But for me, it really started with one, I was just learning about finances. Because other than like I was good at saving, but I was never really taught to invest. The concept of having your money work for you was really new to me. Like that, I only learned about that in 2020,
Mhm.
really. And I was, reading finance books and I was watching webinars and just getting curious and I couldn't decide between real estate or stocks. I really liked the idea of like owning something and controlling it. We put stocks in, it can go up and down. I don't have like I can't control that. Whereas real estate for me, the more I started learning about it, I was like, this is something I can figure out. And like even if I couldn't trust that like everything was going to go well, I could trust that like I would work it. Like I will outwork whatever situation I'm in with my properties. I will outwork this and I will figure that out. So it was sort of a step by step for me. I reached out to somebody for advice. She'd been investing for a long time, so she presented options for what worked for us at first. So I invest within multifamily buildings now, but the first property actually I bought was with my fiance, and it's a rent to own. So I think in the States you guys might call that lease option. So you buy a single family home, and then your tenants are going to buy it back from you in 3 years.
Yep.
And then, so you've got like, they're taking care of the house, they're taking care of all the bills. So other than like your mortgage, which is covered through their rent, you're really not managing the house day to day and the problems that come up in the same way that you would with a rental, like as being a landlord. These people, like, they feel like the house is theirs because they take care of it very differently. So that was our first building, and that got us into the game.
Now,
Like we
real
were,
quick, is that a mandate in Canada? Like, do you have to do a lease option or you can rent
no,
there too?
no, you can rent there. Yes.
Gotcha.
Actually, we've got, especially in where I live in Ontario, like we've got really like very high rent. Like the tenants are very well protected legally here.
Gotcha.
So the one of the biggest risks to landlords in our area is really just government regulation. If you've got a tenant who doesn't pay rent, they could live there for free for like a year before you could get a hearing to get them
Oh
removed.
Lord. So what made
Yeah.
you guys go lease option on that first one?
It was just the first strategy that was really exposed, like I was exposed to. Didn't know about Burr. I didn't know about a lot of other things. We were talking about buying a house in 3 years. So that would have been a good timeline to like put some money to work. We could keep saving. We get the down payment back when we sell the house to the tenants in 3 years. You're not really a full-time landlord, which worked because we worked two full-time jobs. So it was the strategy that worked for us to get our toes wet. But I knew by the like, so we had a few months lead time before like the deal was under contract and closing. And by the time we were closing, I knew I was like, I want to do more of these. I want to own real estate. I don't want to just be the passive partner on a deal. So we JV'd on that one. So the company that we worked with were like rent to own experts. They helped us guide the decision making.
That's really
But
cool.
then I was like, okay, how can I do this going forward? Because that was also all the capital that we had. We put it into a deal. You're not burying it. You're not getting it back in 6 months or a year. We're waiting for 3. So I
Yeah.
was like, okay, what do I have to learn now, and who do I have to become if I want to keep going?
So how did y'all I just want to dig into that for a second for the
Yeah.
listeners. I think it's a good learning opportunity. How did you set that up, like the lease structure? What does that look like, from a high level view for yourselves and the tenants who are eventually going to buy the home?
So how it works is the rental company vetted these potential tenants. They call them tenant buyers. So, a lot of the time it's people who maybe have gotten into a bad position with their credit, or they're entrepreneurs, so they're not claiming enough on taxes to qualify for a traditional mortgage. So they have a chunk of savings, which is like part of the down payment. And then you're picking, so you get matched based off like what you can afford to buy, what you're looking for, what your risk tolerance is, because you're taking into their job situation as well. And then they actually go with the rent to own company and pick the house. So it has to
Wow.
meet a certain set of criteria, that works for us and works for them. And then we buy the house. So we're on title, and then we have an agreement with them. So if we bought it here for this price, they're going to buy it from us in 3 years at a higher price. And it's really based off of like historical numbers in that city. So, like what have been the appreciation trends. And so it's good and bad in the sense that like we've had guaranteed income. It's been entire 100% passive. I've never had an issue with that building that I've had to deal with. Money shows up in my bank account. I don't think about it, which is a
Wow.
beautiful thing when you work a job. And
Mhm.
then for the tenants, they have like they will buy this house in 3 years at a set date, and the house might have appreciated more than what we've agreed to. We're giving up that future potential like equity and appreciation for guaranteed numbers, and that works for us. Not
Yep.
there's different things to be said. It's just about different goals. So for the structure on that, like we're 50%, we put in the money, and then the rent own company is 50%, and they manage the tenants. They're teaching them about like getting them into a position where they can qualify for the house, debt management, credit management, helping them save for down payment. So they're really like strategic advisors. They go check on the property for us. And then so it's a 50-50 split. But the tenants actually put in a portion of money up front, and it's called an option consideration. So it goes towards their future down payment, but it also means that they've got skin in the game. So if they decide they're not going to buy the house after 3 years, we can keep the down, like the option money that they've put in. So let's say it's like $10,000, which here that might be hard to qualify for a down payment with. So we
Yeah,
get to keep the 10,000, and then if they buy it in the future from us, as like they're supposed to, that money goes towards their down payment. So that's like a forced savings program for them.
that's really cool. And you give them a set amount of time. I think you said 3 years. Just like, hey, you got 3 years to get your stuff together to be able to buy this.
Yep, 3 years they get to buy that, and then we have rent, and then they have a. So if they say they need a $20,000 down payment, okay, they give us 10 at the start, and then over the next 3 years they're saving up, they're working on their credit, they're getting into position to buy. So they pay rent, and then they would pay whatever 10,000 is divided by 36. So that would be the extra money on top of their rent, and it basically is just it's a forced savings program, so that gets credited back to them on the day that they close. So they don't have to pay rent and consciously save up for a down payment. It's all part of this program, and they've got fixed costs. Like we don't raise the rent for the 3 years that they live there. So it really works out for both parties. It just depends on like what your goal is with the money that you have.
Yeah. No, that's really cool though. I feel like that's a good way. And I know a lot of people around here who do, that type of structure. It's a great way, to get into real estate.
Yeah.
And then, help folks be able to buy their first home. Now they
Yeah.
have to be disciplined, as you know, and I think that's cool that y'all partner with a company to help them. Like, because
Yeah.
I know some stories of, people will do that and then they never get their crap together. I have a tenant right now who's been wanting to, hey, I want to buy this from you one day. I want to buy this from you one day. Well, it's been 4 years and they haven't made it into progress. And they don't have anybody helping them, along. And we're not in that type of structure. They just
Yeah.
rent from me. So I haven't taken the initiative to be like, okay, let me look at your finances and show you what needs to be done. I may need to go over there and help them with that. But what a fantastic way to, to help people get into their own property, because
Yeah.
it's the dream, right? Everybody own their own home. But like you stated, I think you said that's the first one you guys have done,
Yeah.
because, or the only one you've done, because what that does as, the property owner, is it doesn't really build you necessarily a long-term portfolio
Yeah.
if they do indeed end up buying the property.
But if they don't buy the property, we can either take it back, and then we can, turn it into a rental. We can sell it, we could flip it, we could do what we want. We could extend the contract with them, give them another year. It's really sort of a piece that you work out with them. And like, so it'd be us, the tenants, and the rent home company to figure out. But it's not, I would say, like, it's not a long term wealth builder. It's a great strategy for getting in and making sure your money's working. And then, so I depend, like, if you do them in volume, like I know a lot of people have left their jobs using this strategy, and it's great, but it
Wow.
depends really on what your goals are. So most people might start with this or use it as a tool for high cash flow. But if you want long-term wealth, then yes, you are going to have to shift into like a buy and hold model, buy some properties that you plan to hold for the long term. So it really is like it depends on what your goals are. For us, it was a great starter. My fiance was like not really
Yeah,
into the real
for
estate
sure.
thing. He wasn't drinking the Kool-Aid with me. Yeah,
Yeah,
so this
yeah,
was like it met what he needed, it met what I needed, and it got us in the game. So at least they could say, "I own a
yeah.
property, I'm doing this, how do I keep going?"
Yeah, and those are fixed
Yeah,
returns. Like, come on, you can't be mad about knowing what those rents are gonna be and then knowing what that
yeah,
appreciation is. If you don't do a lease own, then you don't know what the appreciation, if any, is gonna be there in
yeah,
3 years. I mean, over time, over the long run, it's gonna appreciate over time, but in the short run, look at what the market's doing right now. It could potentially go down. So having that stability on that front side, and especially, a lot of, I was talking with this about with our previous guest, Gerald Peters, how important it is to have your significant other on
yes,
board. And so you guys were able to find a middle ground of, hey, I feel comfortable doing this. And you were probably like, okay, I'll do this too if this will get you in the game. And now, it's probably opened the eyes of your significant other. And they, I'm sure since you guys have moved on and bought properties, it's like, okay, I'm in on this. And so what that's a huge piece, because if your spouse or whoever is not on board, it is going to be a painful journey that probably won't be worth it in the long
And
run. And so I think that's really cool that
well,
y'all
it's
did
funny
that.
because we were actually in that position. Like, I was so obsessed with this idea of real estate that there was no room for like discussion or questioning, So that was the hard piece, is that I didn't actually give him the time to, like, the space to sit down and say, these are my concerns. This is what works for me. This is what doesn't. And typically, when you're working with your spouse and you want to do something like this, there's obviously a risk involved financially. So they want to trust you that you're doing like the homework. So show them like what you're learning, share with them the podcast, ask
Mm,
them to read the books. For us, I didn't handle it well at first because I was just so gun ho that I wish that I'd actually
mhm.
taken the time for us to really get on the same page first. Because he sort of like reluctantly did the deal with me. And then, he says he sees and believes in the magic of it now a little bit.
And yells a bulldog. She's like, "We're doing it. Hop on
Yeah,
board."
and that's really who it is, and he's much more, like, analytical, much more reserved, so it's a good mix, but I should have
Yep.
approached it differently, and that's advice I have for anybody, especially for your listeners, is take the time to really sit down with your partner and figure out, like, what are their concerns? What would make this worthwhile for them? What do they need? And if it takes a little bit more time, maybe it takes a little bit more time. I'm not saying, like, 2 years, 5 years,
Mm.
like, don't wait that long, but it's much more fun when you're doing it together because some days you're battling your properties and you don't want to be battling your spouse at home at the same time.
Mm, that's
Yeah.
really good. Great advice. Great advice. And you guys are getting that for free here on the podcast. Y'all need to send Danielle a thank you on Instagram for that amazing advice, Homegirl Invest. So you reminded me when we were talking beforehand of kind of a scenario that I got in myself, to where you bought a number of properties really
Hmm.
quickly. I think you said three, like within
Yeah.
8 months. We bought two within 4 months and hit this wall of, oh crap, that was great. I feel good about myself. I don't have any
Mm.
money. I'm totally out of money now. And I think you said your story was somewhat similar, where you bought this property, maybe a couple more, and then you were saying, okay, we don't have any more capital to be able to keep moving forward, but I know I want to keep buying properties because this is going to change my life. So take us through that journey and how you overcame that
Yeah,
obstacle.
so actually, so once we did the rent to own deal, that was all the savings that we had, like all the capital that we had access to. So I knew I wanted to
Mm,
keep going. I'd been watching a lot of like Instagram and then watching webinars and stuff of people who were talking about using other people's money, raising capital, using joint ventures to scale a portfolio. So I was really caught up in that, and I knew that that was just going to be something I had to do if I wanted to keep going. So I didn't
mm,
I bought the first 3 properties, but only the first one was really with my own money, and then the next 2 I bought were with joint ventures, and I was in a position financially, and I know not everyone's able to do this, where I joined a coaching program so that they could teach me, how do I find properties? How do I analyze and vet these properties myself? How do I become the working partner that people can trust and buy into? I also was able to like lean on the experience of my coach, which was great for raising capital and like working with partners because, you don't have a lot of experience. I've got one deal I'm a passive partner on. So it was figuring out like what do I have to do and how do I build trust with them, but also how do I build trust with myself? Because it's very different going from putting money into a deal to being the person who's, like walking properties, responsible for this property. And you're responsible to your partner now, which is a big responsibility and something I think that gets a little bit lost online in the rah OPM, you know, narrative that we see. Like, I think
yep.
joint ventures are an incredible way to build wealth. And, you're doing it as a team. You want two people to bring different skills. So for my deals, primarily I've partnered with people who already believed in real estate, like they'd own rentals themselves. They have young families, so they're and full-time jobs, so they're not in a position to manage these deals and manage tenant problems, but they have some money that they would like to put to work. So I partnered with them. I bought a duplex and then I bought a quad. But because I bought all these buildings very quickly, and I'm going through renovating and then I'm tenanting all of them as a newbie. And so what I realized after my last building, which was my fourplex, I needed to just stop and learn to manage what I owned. And it wasn't
Mm,
it wasn't more important to keep scaling if I wasn't going to do it well. So I think that that can
Wow.
get lost, or you get into real estate as a newbie and you're so excited about this idea of freedom that you really want to go fast because you're not retiring off of $200 a month that's cash flow. Like you need a volume of properties in order. Yeah.
Preach.
You and that's a
Preach. I'm so sick of people acting like, "Oh, I got 5 long-term rentals. I'm wealthy. I own cash flow, like I'm living off my cash flow." No, you're not. Whoever's saying that is
ex-
lying. They are lying
Thank
to the
you. And
people.
the thing is that people don't realize is that, yes, so you've got these buildings and they're working for you, but things break down. You've got leaking roofs, you've got like pipes that might need to be replaced, you've got electrical things, you've got tenant issues, like you've got maintenance. So I think that this idea that like I'm going to get wealthy and retire off my cash flow very quickly is because you don't have a long-term vision of what it's like to actually own and manage these rentals. So it takes a lot, like you need a lot of
Yep.
volume to in order to like leave your job.
Here's my theory. Cash flow
Hmm.
is the cherry on top. Real wealth, real
Yeah,
tangible wealth is built over time when you buy real estate leveraging somebody else's money, even if you
yeah,
put 20% of yours down, right? You still can leverage 80% from a bank, or if you're doing JV partnerships where they front all the
yeah,
money, whatever the case may be. And then the property is appreciating over time while tenants are paying down that debt and you're getting tax benefits. And now you have all this equity. And people say, well, equity is just equity. It is just
yeah.
equity until you tap into it. And you tap into it without having to pay taxes. Or even if you have to pay taxes, you got a bunch of equity in there that you can pull. And that is where your life will change over time. Cash flow is great. It's a cherry on top, but just like Danielle said, you have to scale, and that's why it's important to scale and know how to. But for cash flow to really start putting a dent into covering your personal expenses and funding your lifestyle, it's a process and it's a journey, and you have to start somewhere. And I think what is great about what Danielle's doing is she has it. She's got the plan in place. I guarantee you, if we talk, a year from now, she's going to have way more properties than she has right now. But you have to learn how to manage
Yeah.
what you currently have before you can ever think, oh, I deserve 25 properties. I deserve 30 properties. And I think that's very mature of you. And a lot of people don't go through that process and they end up getting
Well, and
themselves in
it's
a lot of
because I
trouble.
ran into a lot of problems on my last building. I was a newbie on buying buildings.
Mm,
Um, you're new to this, right? Like you're only going to learn so much by being out there and reading and stuff. And then once you get into it, you realize there's all these things that the books can't prep you for, and your coach can't even prep you for. Because really, in real estate, and I think this is owning a business in general, you're just a professional problem solver. You're getting texts about stuff you've never known
mhm,
that like you could even have as a problem. So I think that you shouldn't be so focused on scaling at the beginning. It's make like buy something that makes
mm,
sense. Understand what you're buying. Understand how to run that. And then the more you do, that's when you start scaling. Like you need a proven concept almost. And then because if you do it too fast, you can over leverage, you can be in a big position of risk. And part of building wealth is defending it. Like it's not just about growing
mm,
your money. You have to protect what you have, and that can get really lost. And now that we're in a time where the economy has shifted, bank rates are rising. The deals that I'm in don't look the same as they did before. We're on variable mortgages, so it's you have to also focus on like how do I protect this? How do I survive now if I want to get that like long-term appreciation? If I want to have that equity, I can't put myself in a position where I'm risking it now just for the sake of volume. And like people investing for
wow.
cash flow,
That's amazing.
cash flow is the health of your property. It helps you ride the long term, but it like I don't want a portfolio of say like 20 duplexes to leave my job. I'd rather go bigger now because of the amount of work involved, but because I'm doing all the work and splitting, like, I'm 50-50 in these properties, we're splitting the cash flow. So now that the cash flow is less, I'm looking bigger, but I'm not stopping. But it's just
Yep,
figuring out like what works now, what
yep,
are the goals, and like don't retire, like don't plan to retire off cash flow like that, like that's a long-term vision. You really have to get that mortgage pay down. You really have to have your properties optimized, stabilized. And for JV partners, if you're looking as an active partner, don't partner, I think, with people who are looking to leave their job in 2 years. It's
mm,
incredible, like, expectations for you to fill, puts a lot of pressure on you. If you yourself are investing to like leave your job, you don't want two partners who are trying to do the same thing. You know, you want to have people in steady financial positions. Having a job is a saving grace right now. It's a saving grace for me.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, if you get a bunch of people in who are trying to like escape what they're doing, that's going to end up causing a
Yes.
lot of friction in the long run. So I want to dive into
Yeah.
how you structure these JV deals. But before you mentioned
Yeah.
you have a job, I still have a job. Still have a W-2 job. And, unfortunately, one of the big, talking points on social media and everywhere else is escape the 9 to 5. They make it seem like this prison. And I'm sure for some it is. But for the majority of us, I have noticed that it has been the catalyst. It's been my superpower. It has been the fuel that has propelled my engine to growth because you can really only grow as fast, like you can only scale as fast
Yeah.
as the money you have access to. Okay. That's just what it boils down to. And so while I think it's amazing to find other people's money, it's awesome to
Hmm.
JV. Obviously, it's always going to help as well if you have cash in your pocket along the journey. So, how has that been helpful for you? Because I know there's probably been a part when you first started where you're like, I just want to go in, full time and screw the 9 to 5, but
Yeah.
you didn't, and I didn't, and I'd love to hear why you didn't go into real estate full time, why you kept your job, and
Yeah,
how it's
and
helped you.
so I for a while, like when I was for the first year, you know, like really, especially the first few months, I felt like my job was an anchor. I was like, it takes up so much of my time. I don't want to do this. I love the people I work with. I don't love my job. You know, I never really thought I'd be working for the government, let alone in it for a while, for a few number of years now. But it provides security that enables me to take bigger risks. You know, like I know that I've got money coming in every month. I know that like our bills are looked after. So while I go and pursue this thing with real estate, I'm also not in a position where, you know, I'm wondering how am I going to make money? How am I going to feed us? Like who's going to pay? We rent our house. So we have used mortgage qualifying
Yep.
ability to buy a rental in a city that's not Ottawa because we couldn't afford it at the time. And so we rent where we live and then buy where we can put our money to work, and that helps subsidize like our costs. But then my job is really just provided the security that's the like launch platform. On the months that we had unexpected maintenance calls for the buildings and we didn't have like enough in the reserves to cover that, we've had our job income that floats it. Or while I'm like, you know, if I want to pay a bookkeeper, I can do that because I'm not taking it out of my money that I'm making from my what you guys call a W-2. That's covered for my real estate stuff. So it really
Yep.
allows me to grow a business profitably, sustainably, and then figure it out because I'm not an entrepreneur. Like, you know, I wasn't born an entrepreneur. I really had no idea how to run a business until I don't even know if until last year.
None
If
of
I,
us do.
yeah,
Me either. I'm running a couple of them, and I have no idea what I'm doing. You just kind of you figure it out as you go.
exactly. Like you're figuring it out. And so some people would like, you know, and great for them if they've like jumped off, like given up a job to go pursue this. Like at the stage I'm at in my life, it's not what I want to do. You know, we're talking about having kids and we still want to buy our own home. So mortgage qualifying, like the ability there is important, and the jobs that we have now provide that stability. So like, will I still be working my job by the time I'm 40? Probably not. The goal is really not to be there, but instead I had a 10-year goal to retire, then I had a 5-year goal, and then last year I was like, I'm going to do this in 2 years. But I felt like my life was out of balance then because I was working so hard on real estate that everything else was dropping. And I had to really look at like, what are my values? What's a priority for me? You know, my relationship, my health. I want to feel like I'm doing a good job at my job and not that I'm just, you know, showing up for the sake of being a person in a chair. So your job can really, if you like, it can enable you. It's a security, but you like use it, you know, take that income, put it into rentals, invest that money. Like don't get stuck in the sense that like your job isn't security forever, but like use it to build that security for yourself long term, build it to build your retirement.
I love that word. That's what I think about it. There's a couple of things that a job does for you.
Hmm.
Vulnerability, all kinds of stuff, but security.
Yeah.
Imagine this. You're on one side of a cliff, you got to walk to another. And on the other side of the cliff is a pot of gold. And you got to walk a tightrope
Hmm.
to get to this pot of gold. You can either do it without a safety net, or you can walk across this tightrope to the pot of gold with the safety net under you.
Yeah.
And that's what your W-2 allows you to do. It's, hey, I know that everything I've ever dreamed of, this life I've dreamed of, is right on the other side of this big gaping hole. How can I get there in the safest way?
Hmm.
And the job allows you to do that along with many other things. And so I think it's awesome what you have done. Um, and I think it's smart. And I think anybody listening to this, you guys listen to this, do not beat yourself up if you are working a
Yeah.
job and want to build wealth. That's normal. That's very, very normal. We were talking offline, me and Danielle. You can go into real estate full time. That's fine, but you're not going to build a rental portfolio very quickly if you go into real estate full time. Because if you go into real estate full time, you quit your job, you still have to have active income. You
Yeah.
have to be able to put food on the table. You got to be able to live. So to do that, you have to generate income. And so the way you're going to do that in real estate is you're either going to be an agent, you're going to wholesale, or you're going to flip properties. That's what you're going to have to do. And all three of those can be headaches. Being an agent right now is probably not the greatest job in the world because home sales are starting to decline and homes are sitting a little bit longer. And then wholesaling, I was talking to a guy in my mentorship who wholesales to generate income. He said it is 43 hours of cold calling per one deal. That's 43 hours of you picking up the phone and calling people and say, hey, would you be willing to sell your property? Do you want to do that? I don't. My job, you have to look and say, is my job better than that? My job is. Same thing with flipping properties. You hear about all these people making great profits. Great. You want to make $30,000 on a flip? Okay, well, you're going to pay 30% in taxes, right off the get go. And then you got to do another one to put food on the table and another one. And then you're like, oh man, I look back, those have been great to keep as rentals. Yeah, they would have, but you couldn't keep them as rentals because you had to generate income to be able to live. And so really think through this before you go saying, I just want to do this full time because that's what I heard's cool. It's not all glamorous. It's not all, I don't care what Chip and Joanna have done on TV to make it look glamorous. Rehabbing properties is just not glamorous.
It's
And so,
not.
anyways, not to go on a rabbit trail down there, but don't feel bad if you have a job and you're not doing real estate full time. That's, you're in the driver's seat. You have an advantage
Yeah.
to all the people who aren't in your position. So utilize it and build that wealth and do it as fast as you and safely as you can. And you'll look back and 5 years from now and you'll say, holy crap, that was a really good decision. You know what? I think I'm ready to walk away from my job, and you'll be able to do it. And you already have that security in place. So
Yeah. Well, and I
uh,
think so it's interesting because I'm actually focused more on wholesaling right now, but it's
mhm,
wholesaling apartment buildings. And it's because I'm working with someone now as like we're business partners, but he's mentoring me. And, he's been in the game for 40 years, but he uses wholesaling as like a cash generation, like generating strategy. And then he has a portfolio of multifamilies. He's also a developer. So, I'm really like growing quite a lot mentally right now and just understanding what does it take to last long term? What are the skills
yeah,
I need? What are the strategies I use? And so having a portfolio that builds you equity and then having the ability to wholesale something is a great in this like so I'm focused on that right now because I want to get out of some of the debt that I'm carrying. I want more cash for reserves because I don't want to continue buying until I feel like I've got healthier reserves of cash that are accessible to me. But so it's like everything comes at a certain like strategies make sense at a certain point. Don't be afraid to pivot. But like I'm not on the phone 43 hours a week for one deal. I'm not going to do that. So he focuses on like wholesaling apartment buildings because you're
yeah,
contacting building owners directly. They've typically got like quite a lot of equity in those buildings. They're more open to a vendor take back or seller financing for a mortgage. You're also assigning it to people who buy apartment buildings who, that's a higher level investor. Your fees are bigger.
yeah.
So instead of trying to get 10 deals, I might be able to do one and get even like higher profit. But that's a strategy that works for me right now because of the position I'm in and what my goals are. It's I don't like wholesaling is not a long-term wealth building strategy.
Yeah.
It's a strategy that gets you cash so that you can then
A
put it
side gig.
into rental properties. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're smart enough to keep your job because
Yes.
it's like that wholesaling money is like you don't know what you're gonna get. It's not guaranteed.
No.
And so, yeah, if you wanna go out and wholesale on the side, and there's a lot of different ways you can do it. You heard Danielle talking about with apartment complexes. Beautiful thing about having a job, if you have excess cash, you can set up systems and processes where you're not having to be on the phone. So there's a lot of different ways to do it.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think just being smart and making sure we're making calculated decisions
Yes.
that protect us in the long run is what's going to be huge for us. So we're running out of time, but I really want the listeners to be able to get a grasp on how you're structuring these JV deals, because I think it's a fantastic strategy for people who are looking to get into real estate. So I've bought real estate pretty much every way possible. 20% down, 10% down, totally other people's money, mixture of my money and hard money,
Mhm.
seller financing, JV partnerships. So the key, I think, like we mentioned earlier, to being successful in real estate, you got to find capital from somewhere.
Yeah.
You have to. It costs money to buy one way or the other. So how are you structuring these JV deals? Explain to everybody what a JV deal is, how you're structuring it, and what it's been like for you.
Sure. So a joint venture is basically two or more parties coming together for the purpose of a deal, whether that's real estate, business, doesn't matter. But essentially, you have a partnership of individuals who are bringing different skills or resources to a deal in order to pursue it successfully. So for me, I do the active side. So I find the properties, I vet them. They close with my team. So it's my lawyer, it's my insurance broker, it's my realtors if we're using one, home inspectors, and then I'm managing the construction and renovation phase. I manage the tenants. I manage the building, and then I'm also managing the investment over the lifetime of how long we own it together. Typically, a joint venture deal, at least in Canada, is 5 years, like the length of your mortgage, right? And then at the end of 5 years, you decide: do we want to hold it? Do we want to sell it? Does one partner want to buy each other out? So that's what I do. And then my partners, they put in the capital. So that's the down payment money. Typically it's 20% down in Canada for a rental. So they're doing like money down, closing costs, renovation costs, and then you co-own that building for 5 years or whatever your term is agreed to. So for my JV deals, we've split them 50-50. So I get 50% of the deal, they get 50% of the deal after their money is returned to them. So if they invest 100,000, once we refinance and pay them back the 100,000, any equity that we've earned in the meat, like after that, is split 50-50, and then cash flow
Oh,
split 50-50. So it's a great strategy for someone who, like me, who wanted to keep going, hit a financing wall, but wasn't afraid to do the work. It is quite a lot of work, and you're managing your life, you're managing your partner's expectations, you're managing this rental property and the good, the bad that comes with it. And then you're also managing like their expectations. So it's important that you're doing these with the right people, that you are having tough conversations with them up front, that you're really vetting that, like, it's a marriage. You're marrying a person for 5 years and you're going to co-own this building. So it should be taken very seriously, but it's a beautiful way to scale a portfolio, grow, do a deal if otherwise you couldn't. You could do it if you didn't have enough money. I've seen two people come together because, one person, both of them had money, not enough to buy a house. They buy it together. And now that, that's what's the way that they could get into home ownership. And it's a great way
yep.
to do it. You just want to very clearly define who's responsible for what, how do we make decisions, and what are the exit strategies at the end.
That's awesome. Yeah, communication and expectations.
Always.
In every JV deal I've done, we like you were talking about, we write it out with an attorney, everything, how everything's set up, everything that could go wrong. That way, everybody knows. Hey, on the front end, I don't care if you're doing it with family. I don't care if you're doing it with a stranger.
Yeah.
Make sure it's drawn up correctly. It's spelled out. Everybody, sets their expectations, and then you go from there. And one thing Danielle's done is, if you're going to be on her side of the coin and be the person who doesn't have capital in the game, but you're managing it, you need to know your stuff.
Yes.
And she has spent years learning. And you heard her. She said, "Hey, I'm slowing my roll real quick because now I'm actually in the trenches,
Hmm.
taking what I've learned. Now I have this experience. How do I dial it all in
Yeah.
and become the best operator that I can be? And then once I become that operator, we'll go on to the next property." So Danielle, this has been amazing. We could talk
Yeah.
for another hour. I love this story. I love what you've done. You just started in 2021. I mean, this is 2 years, and you're making huge waves. And there's a lot of people who are going to learn from this and be inspired from your story. So thanks for coming on. Where can everybody find you if they want to reach out and ask you any questions?
You can find me on Instagram at homegirlinvests. That's because it all started with me with home, trying to figure out how do we buy our own house in a few years. So at homegirlinvests, there's no spaces, no funky things in the title, just the way it sounds. But if anybody wants to reach out, has a question, happy to share what I know. I'm always learning. I don't pretend to be an expert in things I'm not. I like to share the good and the hard side of it because there's definitely both with real estate. So I'm a very straight shooter, but anybody who reaches out, I always have the time of day to help. So at Homegirl Invest, if you got any questions.
Love it. You guys hit her up. Great resource, and she's buying in markets that are hard, from what I'm told, to find deals in. The fact that you guys are crushing it in Canada too is amazing. So holler at her. Thank you for being on, guys. If you're listening to this, if you would share this with a couple people who it'll help. Think of some friends who've been wanting to get in real estate. They're trying to learn. This is a fantastic lesson on all things real estate, getting started with real estate, JVing, and then send me and Danielle a instant message. Wow, we're on AOL instant message. Send us a DMs. Take a screenshot of you listening to this podcast and tag us on the DMs on Instagram. We would both love to tell you thank you personally for taking time out of your day to listen to this episode. So Danielle, I appreciate it, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, JD.